you doing? I'm David Sanchezi, and I'm here to talk about the news of the day. All right, I want to get into this right now. It's titled "Why Democrats Are Losing Ground with Hispanic Voters," and I, for one, would understand this situation. So I want to start reading this little story and get into why this is happening. This winter, Democrat strategists have many causes for discontent. Inflation is eroding Joe Biden's approval rating and his party standing in the 2020 midterm polls. The president's stalled agenda is dispiriting progressive activists and keeping the media's focus on Democratic disarray. In recent polls, Donald Trump is holding his own in a hypothetical 2024 rematch. But it's possible that no political development worries blue America's operatives more than the Hispanic voters' rightward drift. I wouldn't say it is a rightward drift. I just believe Hispanics in general have always been conservative, but don't understand the logistics of the political waves in America. As many of you know, I grew up in New York. I grew up as a Democrat, and they always had a stranglehold on New York. And what happened is, when you're young, you're Hispanic, you're told that Republicans are bad, you're told all this stuff, and just like they do now, they fear you into believing that the Democrat Party is what you should believe in. And what really happens is, as you start to get older and you start to see, well, from my perspective, you start to see their beliefs are not in accordance with mine. And I believe that to be true of many Hispanic voters. See, I know because I have many people in my family who are Hispanic, and I talk to them, and I always would go to them and say, once I became no longer interested in the Democrat Party and what they were pushing, I would speak to my very own family members and ask them and say, well, do you believe in this? Yes. Well, do you believe in this? Yes. Do you believe in this? Yes. Well, just so you know, Democrats don't. And they would be in shock and disbelief. What do you mean? No, that's not what I understand, because many of them were not political. They were just told something and they believed it. And as I started to show them, they started to see what I was saying was true. And especially once Donald Trump came in and I showed them. The problem with the Democrats, they think because they let in millions of illegal voters, or illegals to begin with, that suddenly that the Hispanic vote is going to go towards them, when in fact that's just the opposite. What happened is, many Hispanics come here through hard work. They've earned their way here, and they've escaped places that were ridden with crime, that where they were impoverished and stuff, and they came here for a better life. And they really wanted to get away from the violence that is in South American countries or other Hispanic places. And then what happens is, when you let in a lot of these illegals, not all of them, of course, there's some very good people who they let in, but in general, you're letting in gang members, you're letting in people who are going to commit crimes, and where do they go? To the same place where these people left. So that doesn't embrace the Hispanic way of life. They don't want to see mass exodus of illegals coming into the country. They don't want that. They want to see people come in here the same way they did. And that's what they believe. And for some reason, being that Democrats or liberals are so entrenched in racial politics, they believe just because they let in 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 new Hispanic people into your neighborhood, you're going to be overcome with joy and vote for them. When in fact, if those people aren't doing anything and they're pulling resources from the people in that community, they're just like going to react like anyone else. They don't want to see people who come here illegally and extract resources from them that they've worked hard to get. Do you understand what I'm saying? So that is where the Democrats are losing people. And beside the fact that they just become totally insane amongst all else. In fact, I believe, from what I know, being again that I am Hispanic and I interact with all my family members and friends and stuff like that, most Hispanic people are conservative by nature. Many of them are into church. They're into God. They don't have the same values that the Antichrist Democrats have. So that is one thing where I believe Hispanics who are waking up and starting to see, and a lot of this is because of Trump, because of people like me who realized Trump was selling what we are buying, and they started to inform friends and family members, and just seeing what's happening in Democrat cities. I believe they've just started to pull to the right some more. And above all else, what I think many Hispanics have seen is that the new Democrat Party, not the old one, not the one I grew up in, but the new Democrat Party just consists of lunatics. They consist of people who love tyranny, communist, socialists, and just people who want to impose their will upon you, and many Hispanic people don't like that. For instance, if you doubt what I'm saying, just look at the new poll that came out on how Democrat voters view the tyranny of the vaccine mandates. Here we go. Nearly half of Democratic voters support finding or imprisoning Americans who question the efficacy of Big Pharma's COVID jabs, and significantly, over half think the unvaxxed should be confined to their homes at all times, except for emergencies, according to a new Rasmussen poll. Now let that stew into you. Many Hispanics, first generation, second generation, their families fled from very oppressive governments that did exactly this. Do you think they wanted to come to the land of the free and then be exposed to the things they fled? Of course not. Nearly half also support locking the unvaxxed up in detainment centers if they refuse the shots. Sound like Cuba, anybody? And favor the government tracking the unvaxxed using digital devices to spy on their movements. This is what the Democrat Party has become. I still have many Democrat friends. They don't believe in this, but they don't realize what's happening within their own party because they're not political. They're still under the influence of the old Democrat Party, the old liberals, the old limousine liberals. These people who are running the Democrat Party now are leftists. There is a big difference between the old liberals and the old leftists. You see it right now as their warring factions are going on in between the party themselves. The Joe Manchins, he's one of the few of the old style liberals. The blue collar liberals, they were known as the Blue Dog Democrats. Listen to this one. 58% of voters would oppose a proposal for federal or state governments to fine Americans who choose not to get a COVID vaccine. However, 55% of Democrat voters would support such a proposal compared to just 19% of Republicans and 25% of unaffiliated voters. Who are those Republicans? I'm just wondering. They have no Republican foundation. 59% of Democrat voters would favor a government policy requiring that citizens remain confined to their homes at all times except for emergencies if they refuse the shot. Such a proposal is opposed by 61% of all likely voters. That means everybody overall, including 79% of Republicans. Again, who are these other Republicans that are for that? And 71% of unaffiliated voters. Nearly 48% of Democrat voters think federal and state governments should be able to fine or imprison individuals who publicly question the efficacy. Not even taking a shot. Someone who just says, I don't know if it's the thing for me. I don't know if it's really 100% what they're saying it is. They want you imprisoned and fined for that. Hispanic people are not for that. Only insane, lost their mind leftists are for something like this. That is not American. That is communist. And that's why most of those people who are becoming Democrats now, the newer generation, are all communists. This is what people are fleeing. This is what people don't want. The good thing is, I honestly believe most Americans don't believe that. The bad thing is, the fake news, many politicians try to make it seem like this is the majority of Americans. Social media does, because they have these people who go after you that try to cancel you, make it seem like it's the vast majority of American when it's not, when it's a small few and bots doing that. But yet they have corporations running wild and canceling people just because they disagree. Now I'm going to get back to why they're losing Hispanic voters. In one recent survey from the Wall Street Journal, Hispanic voters were about evenly split between Republicans and Democrats. And I honestly believe, of course, they're leftists that are Hispanic. I just think that it's opening up people's minds. They're starting to see, and I think maybe even as far as 2 years ago, Republicans had maybe 30% of the Hispanic approval. 50%, that's a lot. And I believe more is going to come as Democrats get more and more exposed, as people start to see what these people are about, how they're all tyrannical. They just want to force on you their beliefs. And I just think eventually the majority of the American people are just going to leave that party, and it's just going to be what it is. Maybe 15 to 20% of the population that actually agree with these lunatics. You will always have the people who are uninformed, who don't really understand, and who will buy the narrative. But I believe more Americans are more engaged than ever because they're starting to see how politics affects your everyday life and how not being politically involved can just cause your life to go into shambles. Of course, all this comes in the wake of an election that saw GOP again gain 8 points among Hispanic voters, according to the Democratic data from Catalyst. One thing that this isn't really pointing out, I believe, is a lot of them also are going to independent. They're not really giving themselves up to a party. But if you look at the history of what independent voters go, they usually, the majority of them actually lean Republican. Hispanics are already the largest category of non-whites in the United States, comprising 19% of the U.S. population between 2008 and 2020. The Hispanic share of the electorate increased by about 30%, and the group is poised to grow considerably in the years to come. So I believe what the Democrats have done by opening the borders, and what they believe, I'm just trying to get into their head, is by opening the borders and let severely impoverished people come into the nation, they'll offer them gifts and they will vote Democrat. I believe that's what they think. I don't know how that's going to work because even Hispanics that come here very impoverished, a lot of them do want to come to work. Although if you look at statistics, many more immigrants coming here are living off the system. I just think, again, by nature, even many of those are very religious, and eventually they'll see the light, I hope. Hopefully they won't just start voting Democrats because they're not for that. They're fleeing places based on exactly what the Democrats are trying to do. So I'm hoping eventually, as they're here and they're trying to make them voters, which I think will be defeated in the Supreme Court. However, I do think eventually they'll start to see the light. They don't want to end up back where they fled from. That's what I believe. I don't know if I'm right. I guess time will only tell, but that's the way I see it. And there's another article I want to go through real quick just to show. It states here in this article, it's not just white people. Democrats are losing normal voters of all races, and that fits in the thing with the Hispanics. And again, I believe it's because most normal people do want the American dream. They believe in what America stands for. Just it seems more people are not willing to fight for what it stands for. I don't think Americans have the courage they used to have, but again, only time will tell. A Democratic firm hosted focus groups with women in Virginia who voted in the 2017 Democrat governor Ralph Northam, in the 2020 for Democrat President Joe Biden, and then this month for Republican governor-elect Glenn Youngkin. It was centered on the suburban women, a group that pivoted significantly to the right in the governor's election. Consultant Danny Barefoot said that Anvil Strategies called roughly 30,000 people in Virginia. Most didn't answer, but several hundred of them fit the criteria he was looking for. People who voted Democrat, Republican in the last 3 elections, those people were called back and offered a $100 gift card if they do a lunch hour Zoom and talk about why they voted the way they did. 96 women, a fifth of whom were not white, were broken into 3 different sessions. Barefoot sat in on one of them and got permission from the funders to share quotes and results. Focus groups are put together differently than surveys, which weigh the responses to reflect the population at large. While 96 respondents isn't enough for a robust polling sample, it is a chance to dig deeper into the views of a slice of the electorate. Virginia is about 2/3 white, and the sample was 79% white. So slightly wider than the state at large, but not by a ton. 11% of them were black women, 6% were Latina, and 4% Asian American. They come from around the state. Barefoot said he didn't ask about college education because what he was interested in was people who lived in the suburbs regardless of race or educational background. I'm just going to say this, and this is what I believe about most people. I really don't think the majority of people as a whole, when you're interacting with people, when you're just meeting people, when you're in a work environment, I don't think everybody looks at race overall. I think most people just want to get along with other people. I think people want to interact and just feel welcome. I don't believe what the left pushes, saying that everything is based on race. I don't. Now, there's always been problems of race in this country, but I think it's mostly delegated to a small minority of people. And I just honestly believe most people just want to fit in as a whole and just get along with everybody. What Barefoot found is that while the women agreed with Democrats on policy, they just did not connect with them. When asked which party had better policy proposals, the group members overwhelmingly said Democrats, which I don't agree with. But when asked which party had cultural values closer to theirs, they cited Republicans. That's tough to kind of understand, I guess. I guess people vote on cultural things. They see how the culture itself is changing, and I think people want things to stay where they are because they believe in the country, like I said. And I don't see how they could think liberal policies are better, because if you look at it, again, I just think these are people who have been Democrats for so long that it's hard for them to change their way of thinking. Honestly, most people are set in the way they think, and they don't like change, and they don't like to believe that things are changing before their very eyes. I believe that's why they say that, because there's no way you could like policy proposals better and then vote against the very policies they're enacting. If you know what I'm saying, it doesn't make sense. I just believe they want to believe that Democrat policies are better, but right now they're not just seeing eye to eye with them, and I just think that's the whole shift of what's going to happen. The biggest disconnect came on education. Barefoot found that school closures were likely a big part of their votes for Youngkin. Again, that's my point. That is Democrat policy. So again, when people say that, they're just confused at what they're thinking and what they're trying to say. They don't want to change their way of thinking, but it shows that they are. And that frustration at school leadership over the closures bled into controversy pushed by Republicans around the injection of critical race theory into the public school setting, along with the question of what say parents should have in schools. Again, we're here. One Latina woman talked about how remote school foisted so much work on the parents. Yet later, Terry McAuliffe, the Democrat nominee and former governor, would insist that parents should have no input in the child's education, as she put it. They asked us to do all this for months, and then he says none of this is our business. Again, Democrat policies. You see what I'm saying? They will sit there and say they prefer Democrat policy. That is a Democrat policy. So these are people just in denial, but they're moving whatever it takes. Whether they're in denial and they swing over, is just a fact. They see what's happening and they won't vote for the lunatics, because that's what these people are, lunatics. Anyway, I don't want to read all this because I don't want this to be a long video. I just kind of want to show you that the demographics are changing. People who were minorities before and who just believed, whether that was women, Hispanics, blacks, who were brainwashed for years thinking that the Democrats was the only way to go, that Republicans were the way to go, are starting to see the light. And even now, the Republicans we have right now, the rhinos, are not the way to go. I believe we all have to go for the MAGA first. The America first is the way to go. The nationalists who believe in our country, the old rhinos, the Dan Crenshaws, they have to go. We cannot have these people in our party anymore because they do nothing. They've done nothing to help us get out of this while we get attacked by Democrats. They do nothing. They're the party of whatever. As long as they're getting their money, as long as they're not being bothered, they don't care. We can't stand for this anymore. But it's a slow process, and I think we're going to get there. Anyway, I just want to show you this, that things are changing. I think things will get better. I believe that. I do believe Americans believe in freedom, and I'm going to remain optimistic and think we're going to follow this Virginia objective. But it can't happen unless you're involved. You have to get involved. You have to get out there. You have to get out there during the voting and watch the votes coming in. Make sure the Wi-Fi channels are clear, and that's the only way we could change this. It's tough, but no one ever said war was easy. Anyway, thanks for watching. God bless America, and God bless all of you. And I'll talk to you later.